Welcome to Self Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, London Souza. Hey, before we jump into this episode, I just want to make sure that you get all the free things possible. If you haven't already, you need to get your Self-Love and Sweat free monthly life coaching calendar. Honestly, the way to experience deep change in your life is by doing small little things over time. And so that's what you'll find in this free calendar. You can get it by going to lifelikelondon.com/calendar. Get yours for free, and let's get into today's episode. Happy today and welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is such a gift, just such a wonderful woman that I've had the privilege of meeting here living in Utah. And the funny thing is we're also from basically the same hometown in Central California, which we figured out the day that we met. We have Dr. Kirsten Thornhill here today. Can I say that? Is that okay if I introduced you as doctor? I love that you're a doctor.
Yes, it is new, but yes.
Thank you for being here today. And I just want to briefly intro how we met, and then, you guys are going to hear how freaking awesome and why I love Kirsten so much. But we met in the teepee. So we met my friend Becca, who I met out here in Utah. She has a teepee, like a legit teepee in her backyard, where she does sound baths, plant medicine ceremonies. It's such a great place. I love going to Becca's teepee. So one day, me and my neighbor Bryson, we go to Becca's house for a hot sound bath. And there's like a little intimate circle. I think there's maybe like 6 of us, small group. And we're just all like, just chit-chatting and talking about where we're from. And I mentioned I was from a small town in Central California. And Kirsten's eyes lit up in a way that only people from the 209 light up. Like, wait, where? And we figured out we're from, very close to the same town, have a lot of friends that know each other, wild, but not wild, because I feel like things happen like that in my life and in your life too all the time. And I remember that day you came in and you were just like sharing what you had gone through. There was a lot happening in that moment. And I just remember sitting back and being like, oh my gosh, this girl's so badass. She's just showing up for herself, showing up for the journey. No shame, guilt, or what she's been going through. Just it rolled off the tongue, right? And those listening, for those listening, this could be their first episode they've ever listened to, but probably not. And in my family, it was like, you didn't talk about the hard things. You just pretended like everything was okay. And you just said you were all good and you put a smile and some lipstick on and everything was great, right? And here's this gorgeous, wonderful, vibrant human, Kirsten, in the teepee, just like, this is what happened. Here's what I've been doing. It was just like so as if you were just talking about anything. And I love that. And that's what I love about the podcast and what I love about you. And so before I pressed record on the episode for today, I told Kirsten, I'm like, well, let's just talk like we normally do. Just now we're pressing record. Right. But I'm so happy to have you here. I freaking adore you. Tell us a little bit about you so that the listener can just, understand more about you.
Oh, well, thank you for that introduction. My cheeks already hurt. And we've just begun. I don't even know where to start. What I would say is if somebody said who you are, I really just try and show up in this human experience to the best of my abilities. And what that typically looks like is showing and sharing love with people. Even though professionally, I just became a doctor and I do research. But personally, I think I'm a lot more grounded and self-aware to be able to connect with people on very, very different scopes and levels. And then that kind of translates and bleeds into what I do professionally.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember. Well, we were at Friendsmas. Was Friendsmas, right? That's what it's called. At my neighbor Bryson's house. And I invited Kirsten. I'm like, come over. And then we were sitting next to each other, talking about how awkward it is when people ask you what you do and how we kind of don't like that question, and how you were like, I don't know about how I feel like saying that I'm a doctor. And we are
Hmm.
just talking about that. Then we're in the gift exchange and we're all in a circle and we have to say something we're excited about. And Kirsten goes,
Yeah.
I'm excited because I'm a doctor. And you just let it out, which is I love that, right? It's like when you have something that you're a little bit like funky about, might as well just like say it and get it out. What was
Mm.
that moment like for you? What was going through your head? Do you feel different now that you say doctor? Like, where's that stand?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome leaks into us any given day, any given time, no matter what we've accomplished or not. And when I did arrive to that party, right, I was looking for you because I was like, I know no one, but I know London and I know she is radiant. So these people will reflect that too. And I started talking to a gentleman and he's like, what do you do? And I think my philosophical brain said, in what regard? Like professionally or personally? Because my innate reaction to that question is I'm having an intense human experience and getting to find out things along the way. But professionally, that's a different story. And I didn't go into that. And he was really surprised that was my response. But then when we were in this beautiful circle and people were sharing things they're excited about, and I knew nothing about them, I was like, okay, I am excited that I finally finished school after 10 years. And I have been working on being seen and being heard more. And I am really proud of that. So I am going to share it regardless of how people respond. I'm excited. And so it was like a very beautiful opportunity to get to use my voice to share what I was proud of, even though it was just a glimpse of getting to meet new people and we're all sharing this minor thing and none of us know each other.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I loved that. I remember looking over at you and being like, oh, okay, she's going to own it. Today's the day she's owning it. And I'm right next to you. And I love it. I want to talk about your heart attack. I want to talk about your 30, right? Did you had your
Mm-hmm.
heart attack at 30?
Rep
Wild.
right after I turned 30.
What, what,
Uh,
yeah, like physically what was going on? And like, I know you see it because that's how we roll. It was like, it's something more than just the heart attack, right? But like what physically
mm,
happened, what was going on? And then, yeah, tell us that story.
Wild story in hindsight, right? If only our foresight was as significant and impactful as our hindsight. Uh, my background is in preventive cardiology. So through school, I worked with inpatient, outpatient physicians and patients to help with preventative health measures to help people before they have a heart attack. Like what markers can we find? What type of physical activity can we recommend? What type of stress coping mechanisms? And so me having a heart attack was never in my cards. It was probably early May. I got bronchitis out of nowhere, probably through cycling and being around people, or maybe just being in social settings. And so I took time off of exercise, and my coughing got really bad. So I ended up going to urgent care, and I had minor pneumonia. And I just had a viral bronchitis. So there wasn't really any antibiotics I could be put on, just to rest, warm liquids, really, really rest. And so that was really hard for me because I love to exercise. I love to move my body. And so I really took time off until I physically had no more symptoms, to ensure I'd be okay to come back to exercise. So I returned. I was cycling again, like normal. I didn't need an inhaler. I was just slowly getting back into it. And I think I cycled about 4 days that week and had no problem. And I was like, great, I'm back. I just felt a little weak because I was sick for 2, 3 weeks. And then on the fifth day of cycling that week, I had a heart attack while I was in class, and I had no idea. I just had stabbing pain in my diaphragm. So right between like my belly button and my chest in that area. And it kept getting worse when I tried to take deep breaths. And I was cycling at about 85% to 100% of my maximum. So I was breathing really hard. And then I struggled to breathe. And I was trying to diagnose myself really quickly and say, okay, is this because I haven't exercised? Is something going on that I'm not aware of? And so I didn't want to get up and leave class, because at that point I started hyperventilating because I couldn't get a deep breath. And so I said, okay, I'm going to wait here until class is over and somebody can help me off and we can try and figure out what's going on. At that time, I also didn't know if anyone else had a medical background in the room, that if I were to get off the bike and fall, if somebody could save me. So I said, I'm going to stay on. So class ended. My partner helped me get off the bike, and I still was saying, I'm really struggling to breathe. I was checking my pulse in class, and obviously it was really high, which wasn't helping because I was like, okay, I'm exercising. Of course, my pulse is high. I don't really know what's going on. And I have no medical history of cardiac on either side of the family, by the way, like no history of anything. And so I go home and the chest pains are still really bad. So I try and sit in the shower because I'm thinking, okay, maybe my lungs are still affected. And so I tried to get some steam in there and just take some deeper breaths slowly in the shower. And it didn't really help. And so I went to lay down and kind of just lay in fetal position because closing my chest or contracting my chest felt a little bit better. I tried to fall asleep and I heard a voice say, don't fall asleep, you might not wake up. And it happened twice and it wasn't my voice. I, I have no idea whose it was. And I tried to roll over and fall asleep one more time. And when I rolled over onto my back, I like gasped for air. And that's when I told my partner, I think I need to go to the emergency room. I don't know what's happening. And I think it's beyond what I can help myself with. And so by the time he hopped in the shower, and it was maybe 10 minutes from when I told him we need to go. And luckily, St. Mark's is right, like within a mile of our place. Yeah. So he was able to take me there. And by the time we got to the ER, which was only like 10 minutes after I said this, I couldn't even talk. I walked into the ER and my hands were on my knees. And I was literally hitting my chest, trying to tell the nurse that I couldn't breathe because I didn't know I was having a heart attack. And so they got me back right away. And I was really kind of going into shock because I had been in such discomfort. And so they ran an EKG on me first, and I asked to see it because you're like, oh, I wanted to know what was going on because I didn't think it was my heart because previously I had bronchitis. That was more of a lung issue. And so my EKG came back normal. And so at first I thought, okay, this is good. My heart's okay. I don't know what's going on. And so took me back for blood work. That ER visit ended up being almost 8 hours before I got admitted. And I really got nervous when they said I needed to get a CT scan to see if I had a pulmonary embolism. And when I came in, I could talk in very short bursts when I had a breath. And so I let them know about my background and that they could talk to me medically to tell me what's going on and not beat around the bush or something.
Yep.
And they said, okay, we're going to get you back to see if you have a pulmonary embolism. And my partner does not have a medical background. And he kind of saw me like start to freak out, and I wanted to cry, but I couldn't breathe. So crying would have obviously made me need to breathe harder. And he said, what's going on? I said, they're going to see if I have a blood clot in my lungs and it could go at any time and I could die. And I said that and he just stared at me. And that was when I was really scared because I had bronchitis. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what if it is something to do with my lungs? So there was like an hour of waiting before they could get me in for the CT. And then it took about an hour after the CT to get the results. And luckily I didn't have a pulmonary embolism. So I was like, thank goodness. Because at that time when I'm waiting, I'm also like, if I do have one, it could rupture. And luckily I'm in this facility and hopefully I can be taken care of. But that's terrifying because what if I exercised and made it worse?
When you're there, like you're in the position of needing the support and so much. I imagine like, not that we don't know more, but knowing more probably made you more petrified.
Oh, absolutely. Because, and the doctor's coming in and telling me how certain variables in my blood results are increasing, which means I was continuously having a heart attack while I was in there. And to give some perspective, they look at your troponin levels, and somebody who's having a major heart attack has troponin levels in the blood of about like 5,000, like massive amounts. I was in the hundreds range and it was continuing. So I was having a minor heart attack while I was in there. And so every couple hours they did my blood work and my troponin was still increasing. And so they kept telling me to try and remain calm, but I'm like, okay, I'm actively having a heart attack while I'm sitting here and I'm just waiting for, I don't know. So they ended up keeping me overnight. And that was a really weird 48 hours of I'm a patient in a room that I once would come in and work with patients. And this is really surreal because days before I got a state award from the state of Utah and got invited to this big gala and was I got voted best in education for the state. And it was just like this being
Mm.
seen. It was this first time of like me being seen post finishing school. And then I have a heart attack a couple days later. And so while I'm in there, I get an email that I was in the Provo Herald and here's this article about me. And the title was like doctoral student excels through rock bottoms. And I just start crying laughing while I'm in the hospital because I was just at a career high 2 days ago. And now I don't even know this is a rock bottom yet, but I'm like, this has got to be a rock bottom of my physical health. I've never endured a physical health problem, luckily and gratefully, besides sports injuries. And so
Yeah.
I'm laughing, and the nurse is like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm in the newspaper, but I'm here."
Yeah.
And so that was that immediate experience, right, is forever stamped in my brain because it was so extreme and it's something I've never gone through before. And then I didn't even think about what would happen next. I just wanted to make sure I was okay. Uh, so that was May last year.
Yeah, and here we are. Yeah, February. So, yeah, March, a few months. We'll have to have a little celebration of your 1 year. Now you're healthy, whatever we can
Absolutely.
to commemorate that. But what's interesting to me, and I'm sure there's people listening that think this too, I honestly thought when you have a heart attack, you just collapse. Like, I didn't think you could, like, yeah, distinguish if you want to get on the bike or off the bike. Like, I didn't realize that there's this, yeah, that's what a heart attack can be or look like. So I just feel like I learned
Mm,
so much right now because I thought like, oh, your heart just does its heart attack thing and then you're, on the ground, or I didn't realize that there's yeah, like you could have awareness through that, and maybe someone listening has gone through that before or didn't know that either, right? And I just think, yeah, that's super interesting, right? You're not just
mm,
attack and then done. It's like there's
yeah.
some things to maybe notice or pay attention to, or like you said, those voices or just an inner knowing of like, wait, I need to
Mm,
get checked out.
absolutely. And I definitely want to echo or bold, underline that women have different symptomatic responses during a heart attack than men.
Okay.
And we've probably heard or been informed that, right? Maybe left arm tingling and chest pain is a typical sign of a heart attack, which it is. But in women, it may present very differently. It may be
Mm.
chest pain that's coming and going. It may be a shortness of breath. It may be all of a sudden, maybe a few days of extreme onset of tiredness. And so I definitely encourage people, because unfortunately you won't know until you know,
Mhm. And
to try and really check in with yourself, right?
yeah.
How are you physically feeling? How are
What are the levels called again? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You said the what's the T word
a
that you
troponin?
troponin, right? So you're not just going to like feel off and want to go run and get your troponin levels checked all the time, right? It's like,
Right,
how do you
right.
know when it's time to, especially as a woman, like you said,
Yeah.
yeah, the symptoms are different than what you would expect, or like being tired. I would never think, oh, and not that we want people to think big things out of something that's not that big, but like, I would never have known that. Never.
Mm-hmm. And it's also so important, and not to even stretch it as far as hypochondriac. In your journal, whether you journal or just make a note, if you notice just feeling weird one day, just write it down. It may be nothing, right? It may just be stress from work or, where you're at in your menstrual cycle or whatever it is, but just make a note. If you feel like something's weird or just write it down. Because once I was in there, once we figured out the diagnosis of having a minor heart attack, I had acute pericarditis, which is where the swelling of the lining around my heart filled with fluid. And I was obviously cycling really hard, and my heart couldn't keep up with the demand. But I had that resulted because the infection from the bronchitis went from my lungs to my heart, and no one knew. I didn't know. The doctors didn't know. They said this happens to less than 1% of people, and it's typically in people that are in their 20s and 30s that are really active because we're pushing our physical boundaries. And so that once I got that information, I was like, this is really weird because something happened to me that no one would have expected. I would have never known. And some of the symptoms I did still have, like I mentioned, this sharp chest pain. And even couple days before, I was really tired, but it was hard for me to ever think about it could be a heart attack because I was getting over being sick. I started cycling again. I just thought those were potential things that would happen when I'm getting back into it. And so when they were like, have you noticed any like tiredness or shortness of breath the last few days? And I said, yes, but I don't know if it's correlational or causational because I was also sick. And so even just saying those things out loud to the physicians and the team that I was working with, I was like, oh, those are some things I kind of brushed off. Or,
Mm.
maybe I could have told my partner or told a friend of like, that is really weird. I'm feeling like this today. Just kind of voicing it out loud or sharing it with somebody could really help to make sure that you're with someone or you're not alone during these times where you kind of feel off. Because what would have happened if I fell asleep? I have no idea. What would have happened if I didn't go to cycle that class and there were 40 people around me? Like, so, everything happens in the timing that it does for a reason, whether you understand it or not at that time, right? Hindsight or foresight. But I'm glad things happened the way they did and the timing that they did because the rock, so to speak, that was dropped in the pond that day rippled. It's still rippling for me, but for probably 4 months after that, I was in a really dark place. And I have a lot of gratitude for that space that I was in. But wow, what a life experience to have a part of you physically die.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And that's when I met you, was when we were in the TP and you were like coming out of that dark
Yeah.
period. I was just talking about this because before you and I hopped on, I was on a one-on-one client call. And you said, everything happens for a reason. We might not be sure about it. I like to say things happen and we make a reason rather than
Mm,
everything happens for a reason, because these stories that we tell are so tight knit, right? In terms of
mm,
that. So like you said, when you look back, you kind of don't wish it didn't happen. Of course, in the moment, all the things, but like things happen and we make a reason. Why
mm,
did Kirsten have a heart attack?
mm. What a question. I think it's multifactorial for sure. But one is I needed to slow down. And whether that meant physically slowing down because I was trying to take on the world, or if that meant emotionally and mentally slowing down and checking in with myself because I became so good at being there for others and putting everything first. I still was in a really good place to put some of my needs there, but I still wasn't my main focus. And that experience had to happen for me to, one, truly love myself at rock bottom. I physically can't even walk up the stairs for months. I'm on bed rest. I am left with me. And I'm really glad that at that time I already had a really good meditative and journaling practice. But I really had to lean in and say, okay, what am I not seeing in my blind spot? What am I not practicing? What am I not dealing with that this experience is trying to show me? So that was a huge factor. And then two, it was a weird culmination of my background has been preventive cardiology. And then I have a heart attack.
Yeah, make
I,
it up. Wild.
yeah. And so I really not even an identity crisis, but I'm a very introspective person and thought maybe I'm not meant to work in this field anymore. Maybe this is the most symbolic sign that yes, I've endured school, I finished my PhD, I now have that in my pocket. What if I don't need to work in that field anymore? What if I can do anything with my life now and I've never had that privilege and that freedom? That this is just a brand new restart that I don't know I'm going to be really grateful for. Uh, and so those months were very heavy with a victim feeling, whether
Mm.
that is right or wrong isn't necessarily in the ballpark, but sitting with, okay, this has happened. This is happening for me. Why is this happening for me? Going through the periods of grief, of anger. Why did this happen for me? Going to the periods of sadness, like, why did this happen for me? Then entering the state of empowerment of, wow, why did this happen for me? Just that whole process, right? I would say I'm more on the latter end now of this power.
That part.
But
You said the same thing, but you said it angry, sad, and empowered. And everybody listening felt it. I just got goosebumps over my whole body. And this is huge because this is the words change our world, right? It's like the
mm,
same but different, same but not. It's
right.
like the same sentence, but sometimes we need to ask that question or get things out from a space of anger and grief and sadness and then empowerment, right? And I love that you
Mm,
said about that victim, wanting to be in that space and that it's not right or wrong, neither here nor there, right? We all need that for some amount of time and we get to choose
hmm
the duration of that. And when we choose to transition from victim and sadness and feeling, right? I don't think we should skip over that, but we get
right.
to decide how long do I want to be here? And then when is it time for me to move to that empowerment phase? And I just
Right.
love hearing the nuances in your voice of why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? It was like
Absolutely.
epic.
And it, and then so that there's that level of internal conflict, internal talk, internal mindset with experience. And then there's that external. How do I tell people I had a heart attack? Do I want to tell people? Do I want to have those conversations? Do I have the bandwidth to have those conversations? Are people going to feel bad for me? Right. So then it's like this juggling of internal dialogue, external, how do I ask people to be here for me and support me? But I also don't want to project onto them and have them feel my pain because I'm aware that I will probably project if I'm not in a good place. So at that same time, when I was really going through this healing process, is when I kind of found Becca
Mhm.
and going to these different sound bath ceremonies and really leaning into my spiritual community, which has blossomed.
Mhm.
And I was just in a state of like, this happened for me. I don't have all of the answers yet, but this is going to make me stronger as a healer, stronger as a leader, stronger as somebody who people come to for their health. And
Mhm.
now I have a deeper layer to be able to relate to patients, whether I still work in cardiology or not, which I actually don't right now. Um, I can still relate to them on having something catastrophic happen to you out of nowhere. Even just that level of humanness, of empathy and compassion, of experiencing something you never thought you would. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So good. We heard a little glimpse of Kirsten's dog bark, and you have the cutest doodles ever.
oh, thank you.
Little guy, and they're so sweet. And and I say that because I know you're back at it again, right? I went to cycling class with you. You brought me to M Cycle Studios to do an 8 a.m. class on a Sunday. It was so fun. I know recently you had your podium ride, so you got to be on kind of that platform, and that cycle place you go to is phenomenal. So it's just like great music, good vibes, choreography. The guy was burning sage or Palo Santo at the end. We had a meditate epic, right? And you're with your dogs, and I know you're hiking and getting out. And every morning at 6 a.m., Kirsten cold plunges on a cold plunge in her roof that she oftentimes has to break the ice first because
Yeah.
it's so cold in Utah. Like you're living, right? You're alive and you're living. And it's so beautiful to watch and witness. But what has that journey been like? Like, have you been a little bit
Mm,
with it? What was like getting on the bike the first time after that? Were you scared? Like, and now you're inviting more of the community in, right? Like, I'm really grateful of the time that I met you. Like, of all
mm,
timelines to meet Kirsten, like, this is really fucking cool. And it's such a gift to see you and witness this. Like, it's gonna make me a little emotional, but like you're living and you're going after what some people might not have, some people have heart
yeah.
attacks and freaking die, and here you are, and that didn't happen. So what was that journey like back to finding your physical health and well-being and now stepping into
Mm,
this role of facilitator for community and all of that, right? You're not
mm,
pumping the brakes, woe is me, like you're creating something anew. And what's that been like?
mm. It really was a burn to the ground for me. So the months that came after, right, the heart attack is I'm dealing with the physical immobility. Okay. And as a person that exercises numerous times a day, every day, to have that taken away from you, it messes with your psyche. It messes with your physical appearance perceptions. It messes with the communities that you have around exercise, right? So all of that's gone. While that's gone, I've obviously finished school. I'm now unemployed while I'm job hunting. So I'm job hunting, but I feel very uncomfortable of, okay, this limits me because I can't work in person. I don't want to have to tell an employer that, hey, I'm on bed rest, right? I don't want to, it's not that I don't want to communicate the vulnerabilities. It's, I don't want this to continue into this huge new chapter of my life where I'm finally not in school after 10 years. So I'm dealing with that. And then I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, I don't know who I am anymore. I feel like a part of me died. I don't recognize myself, even though the same people are around me. I went through a full blown death, a physical death. And so then that also came with an emotional and mental death as well. I got to a point in probably, I want to say it was September, I didn't want to live anymore. And that was a really, really scary place to be because of my background being so close with physical and mental health. I, communicated my thoughts and feelings to my therapist, and it really was beyond what her and I could do. So I really looked to my resources, even if I didn't know what they were. I just started calling around places of, who can I talk to beyond my cognitive behavioral therapist, because I'm having these feelings and these thoughts, and they're not a reflection of who I really am, but they are a projection of what I've gone through. And so I'm going to use my resources because I know if I were to tell a friend this was happening to me right now, they would want what's best for me. And even though this is hard, I need to help myself. And if I can't help myself, I need to find people that can. And so I really had to go through a mental death after that. And again, these experiences were like so raw and vulnerable that there's so much power in them. There's so much power in being at your lowest and still being your true self, regardless if it's to strangers, friends, family, whoever you need to tell, and just owning it. It's not even being proud owning it. It is just like, this is what I'm going through. If this is how you could support me, if this is how you could be there, great. If not, I totally understand. Just full surrender of what's happening. It will help with the healing process, whether you're in the beginning stages or at the end. And so once I started to quote unquote come out of this, I really was very introspective for months, still very much hermiting, but really leaning into my spiritual community, and trying to go back to cycle again was terrifying. You're telling me I'm going to walk into the same room that I had a heart attack in and no one's going to know and I'm going to be fine? Terrifying. But I did it anyways because I said I'd rather do it scared than not do it at all. And that's kind of been a mantra of mine, even of late, of like, I'm really scared, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'd rather do it than ponder what would have happened if I did or didn't. And so I got back into it. And with my background, I've been a clinical exercise physiologist for many years at the U, where I was helping patients post heart attack with exercise rehabilitation. So I just treated myself as a patient. I walked in there, I used my pulse ox, I monitored my heart rate, I took things at my pace, I took my blood pressure, and I just treated myself like an external patient. Okay, I know mentally I can do more because I have a very athletic background, but physically I have to treat myself like a patient. I have to treat myself like a heart patient because I am. And so I really just gave myself grace. That was definitely my word last year, not even knowing all this was going to happen. And then coming to this place of deep, deep meditative work the last few months where I actually connected with my spirit guides in a meditation, and I asked, what was my purpose? Like, what is my purpose in this human existence? And instantly, my spirit guide said to heal and be light. And for you to heal, that means you need to go through a lot of stuff people will choose to not go through. And that is going to make you stronger to be able to help others. And once I got that, I came out of that meditation and I said, okay, this all makes sense now. That was like the answer, right? That I was going through for the grief of like, why? And then I got that answer of, oh, I am here to heal. And because I get to do that and endure these things, this gives me the ability to help others. And that is very near and dear to my core values. So I've really blossomed in that way of opening to community, opening up and inviting people to do my quote unquote weird things with me, and cold plunge communities at my house and sound baths and full moon ceremony. And I've just opened it. And at the end of the day, I'm like, if no one shows, I still love this. If everyone shows, I still love this because it's authentically who I am. So if it's with community, that'll be great. And it will just enhance the experience even more. But if it's an opportunity to connect deeper with self, I also am all for that.
Yes. Yes. So many snaps to that. We were at the, me and Kirsten, not knowingly, but we were at the Utah Jazz game 2 nights ago, right? 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
At the same time, I posted something on stories and then she's like, wait, you're here? And I'm in section 139. And I was like, okay, I'm 135. And so we look up and we're like waving and we see each other. And you sent me a text. You're like, I love how we're like orbiting each other. And I'm like, same. It's just, I love I love everything that you needed to go through in order to get here so that we can tap into this relationship that we've started and are working on. We're always trying to, spend time together and make plans and whatever. And I was with my friend Maritza and she's like, oh, who's that? I'm like, oh, that's the girl we're going to her full moon ceremony on the 12th. And she's like, okay, cool. I'm like, she's from Turlock. And my friend Maritza, who's visiting, she's from Merced too. So she was like, we were just kind of sitting there and it was just fun. We're like munching on French fries. You're one, a couple sections over, and I get to and bring, my friends into your creation and those containers. And I went to your last one, which was so fun. And I knew I couldn't come from the beginning. So I came an hour late, but I was like, I don't care. I want to be there. I want to be in your space. I know I need that for myself. Didn't make a ton of connections with the people that were there, but for me, that wasn't the point. I wanted to show up for me and be in a space of that. So you're creating, what you're creating is impacting my life. So thank you so very much.
I love that. I'm glad.
And then the last thing, I know that I want to honor our time and everything, but for women and our heart, what can we do? What is the day-to-day things that we can do to love on our heart? I know that even as a preventative cardiologist expert that you were, you still got the journey that you needed in that. But for all the women listening, what are some things that we can do to love on our heart even more?
I definitely recommend starting your morning with self. And that can look like 1 minute of silence. That can look like 1 minute of journaling. That can look like 5 minutes of a walk. Check in with yourself. Okay. You may say, Kirsten, what does that even mean? That could be you physically touching your arm, touching your legs, having a somatic experience with self to say, I'm kind of sore today, or oh, wow, my leg's moving. I'm a little jittery. Maybe I'm anxious. Just try and check in with yourself a little bit every day because things do compound, right? Like the saying, kind of habits build upon each other and micro things add up to macro things. And check in with yourself on a daily basis because oftentimes heart attacks are the quote unquote silent killer, right? So how much are we just putting things down, right? Or putting things at the bottom of the list and we keep pushing and pushing and pushing and don't realize that that's contributing to maybe physical manifestations of health or illness. And trying to check in mental, physical, or body, mind, soul on a daily basis, whatever that looks like for you. And maybe that kind of routine will happen over time, can help you preventatively try and figure out, okay, what does my body need today? Do I need to do movement mentally or physically? Okay. Do I need to sleep in longer? Is that for my mental or physical? So kind of having that mindfulness and conscious awareness of self and what you can show up with the world today will make a huge difference for yourself and then who you surround yourself with.
I love that. You're not telling us what to eat or do this. It's like literally a check-in, a work-in process. I appreciate that so much. I know that you are newish to Instagram and you weren't on social media a ton. And even if this conversation is where we leave it, wonderful. But is there a place where others can connect with you? Do you want to share any, info on that? Or do we not want to? It's your call.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I've been on Instagram 1 year now, just
Yay.
personally as like a fun thing. And I want to get better at it and get more involved. And that is KTHORN_ is my username. And I am really big on LinkedIn. That is my one social media that I do speak very authentically on there, mainly about my professional endeavors and challenges. But I feel like I light very well on there. So those are probably my two places.
Noted. We'll add those to the description so those listening can connect with you. Thanks, babe. I appreciate you. I'm so glad to know you. I'm so glad we're friends and we connected in this very cool way. And yeah, thanks for agreeing to share your story on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I love that you invited me to share your space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you at the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self Love and Sweat the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or were inspired by it or something resonated with you, do me a favor and share this episode with a friend, someone that you think might enjoy this episode as well. That's the ultimate compliment and the best way to make this podcast ripple out into the world of others. And also you can leave us a review up to 5 stars wherever you're listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you at the next episode. I appreciate you.